Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Feeney from the Deep Dive Podcast, where we look for buried treasures hidden within streaming media services like Netflix and Amazon Prime. This is a podcast where real medical professionals discuss fake medical emergencies. That means that unless you're Pinhead and you need an emergency acupuncturist, this podcast is not medical advice. If you need medical advice or medical care, please contact your doctor.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jackson Vane.
I'm Johnny Kolosinski. You might remember me from such podcasts as That's Not Yeast, It's Snot, the story of the beer I had earlier.
That thing was disgusting.
It was gross. This is Hi Everybody, a bad medicine podcast. Every week we talk about what Hollywood gets right and wrong about medicine and how the body works. Mm-hmm. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, now iHeartRadio, and you can find us on social media at Hi Everybody MD on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Yep, and then just a random thank you to the person who recorded our bumper this week. And if you would like to record a bumper, you can find us on any of our social media handles or email us at
hieverybodypodcast@gmail.com. We've got the script and everything for you. And yeah, at the end of the episode, you'll hear one more time who it was that gave us this introduction this week.
Yep.
So, Jackson, what are we talking about this week on Hi Everybody?
So we are on the last week of Horrortober 2019. Horrortober. So it's going to be American Horror Story, the new season, and actually this week's most recent episode, which surprisingly is their 100th episode. So we thought it would be a good one to talk about this week.
Happy birthday, Ryan Murphy.
Like he doesn't have enough success already.
Yeah. Finally, he's hit the big time.
Yep.
He's
another show that hit 100 episodes for him.
Syndication money, man.
Oh yeah. I feel like this episode would not be great for syndication though on like your network Saturday.
Oh, you don't think that the Satanist Execution episode is a CBS Saturday afternoon show?
I mean, they tried to do that with Dexter, I think a few years back, where they tried to clean up the Showtime series for like CBS primetime. It was not the same show. Like, they cut out a lot of stuff.
Wow.
Like, I forgot, Dokes, I think, went in and yelled, like, Surprise Mother or something.
Yeah.
They tried to put Dokes in there. They cut all the swearing. The kill scenes just didn't look the same. And then they tried to tidy up him dumping bodies into the river. Into the bay, because he was the bay butcher. So it didn't look as good. So I highly doubt this would be the same.
Yeah. The episode we're talking about is in the 1984 season.
Yeah.
The 8th season.
Yeah, ninth season, actually.
9th season, sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all, like, kind of centered around this camp, and there's been some massacres, and actually, you can actually see one scene in the camp. I think it was just, like, someone got their neck sliced, and there was the one time where I said, that's too much blood, because it was an inappropriate cut.
Right. Yeah, I looked at it and I said, "Oh my gosh, finally we're seeing enough blood."
And I immediately
Jackson
stopped you.
Said, "Well, actually."
Yeah, because they cut right in the front of the neck, and in that area, it's just like
it's just your larynx.
It's cartilage and stuff. And the crazy part is you're not hitting any carotids. And I actually saw a patient who her brother sliced her throat while she was asleep because she was on suicide watch because they were afraid she was going to kill herself. And the brother got tired of doing that for so much that he did it and tried to slice her throat. But
I think, like, you told me that story, like, the third week we knew each other.
And here's the crazy part was, it was the cleanest cut. There's not that much blood around there. Especially when you look at the episode where they cut, which was just about a maybe 2 to 3 inch cut right in the front of the neck. There's not that much blood there. And even if you did nick, like, maybe the external jugular or maybe the internal jugular, there's not that much pressure. It's until you hit an artery where that's the pressure loading vessel. That's when you would expect the blood splatter. That would be beautiful. But in this one, not so much of a blood splatter.
So A for effort, D for accuracy.
Correct, which is surprising. I mean, Ryan Murphy loves the bloody stuff, so I'm surprised. I'm not surprised that there's so much blood, I should say.
But but that's not the scene that we came here to talk about this week.
No, surprisingly not. It's all about how Emma Roberts' character Brooke was framed for the massacre at the campground, which is the kind of whole basis of this whole season.
Yeah, it's a Friday the 13th sort of that kind of murder.
Yeah, except with Richard Ramirez and Satanism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this episode, spoilers, the character Brooke is executed.
Yes. She is executed by lethal injection. And Richard Ramirez kind of visits her or kind of explains to her
how
he wants
astral projects into her prison cell.
But also explaining how he wants to die versus how she's going to die. Mm-hmm. And I think that's funny how he describes him getting the electric chair as lightning bolts striking him and then him going out like that. Mm-hmm. And there were cases, I know we're not a true crime podcast, but like of people getting the electric chair, I should say, where they do like get completely shocked out and then catch on fire too.
Mm-hmm. Like at the end of spoilers,
Green Mile.
At the end of the Green Mile.
Yeah. So if you're not properly, if there's not enough good contact, like if that sponge is not wet enough,
if it's not conductive,
that'll cause that. And the theory behind the electric chair, they thought this was a more humane way to go because it's 2 rounds of shocks. It's not just one. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much you know about the electric chair.
Very little. I missed that day
in biology class.
Yeah. I missed an electric chair day at Central Catholic High School.
So electrocution, like I know we use that term, like if you get shocked or anything like that, they call that electrocution. The term actually comes from execution.
Really?
Yes. So that term electrocution did not get developed until the creation of the electric chair as electric execution. Hence electrocution.
Portmanteau.
So the first shock is really meant to knock you out. The second one is supposed to be alternating current at such a velocity or a rate that would cause your heart to go into an arrhythmia, and that's what kills you. Not so much.
Basically, so you don't get fried, you get a heart attack.
Correct.
Essentially.
Yeah, you're sending your heart into an unstable rhythm, and that's what kills your heart. Because basically half of the reason why your body works is through electrical activity, mm-hmm. and just like a sustained process or just exchange of ions really is what keeps you alive. Anything that disrupts the exchange of ions is what kills you. So that's how the electric chair works. And surprisingly, the affecting of the exchange of ions is actually how you die from lethal injection too.
Really?
Yep. So Richard Ramirez does explain how she was going to die, and it's a 3-drug process, which is the standard drug process. Mm-hmm. He says first you get anesthesia, which makes you lose consciousness, which is true. Usually the first drug that they use is sodium pentothal. Some places are trying to experiment with like Versed, which is midazolam, but that's very short acting. At least the sodium pentothal kind of lasts a little longer. Mm-hmm. Then the second one you get is a paralytic, which does stop your breathing, and I think what they usually use is pancuronium bromide. In the hospitals, we use like vecuronium or rocuronium. That paralyzes you.
You use them as paramedics, you mean?
Yeah, before we intubate you, put in a breathing tube in. Because if you don't paralyze someone before you intubate them, their vocal cords keep kind of fluttering, and it's really hard to pass something through. Because if you hit the cords, then they slam shut. Yeah, and then you have a new.
We talked about that. I don't remember what episode we were talking about. It was. It might have been Human Centipede.
Could be
where we were talking about intubating.
Yeah. But your heart still beats because it's a different muscle type than the things that get paralyzed mm-hmm. with this paralytic drug. Then the third thing that kills you is potassium chloride. And the key thing you want to remember in this one is he says it's all colorless. Okay,
at least colorless and odorless.
Colorless and odorless, and that's what kills you. Even though, spoiler alert, when you cut later into the episode, they're all colored yellow.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. So that's kind of crazy there. He does say that it burns going in, which is true. We've heard that before because we do give people potassium chloride to replete them when they have low potassium. And they do complain that it does burn going in. So they finally bring her... So later into the episode, probably in the last few minutes or so, they bring her back into the execution chamber. Mm-hmm. And you see them starting an IV with like a needle and all that. And a syringe too.
Yeah, and it's the same right angle that we always see. The dramatic injection.
I will say the additional problem with it too is usually with lethal injection you want a thicker needle. Mm-hmm. The needle they use is like the baby thinnest needle in the world, and the problem with using that is if you're pushing high volume amounts of medication,
and we saw,
and they look very high. Can you imagine? It's like trying to suck a milkshake through a very narrow straw. It's really hard to do, and at some point the straw might collapse or it might get clogged up, and that's another issue with doing something like that. Like now at that point, now you're causing cruel and unusual punishment because you're looking for a vein, you can't find one, you finally get one, you're pushing meds in, it doesn't work, you have to restart it, you have to put in a new one, you're causing mental anguish at that point. Mm-hmm. I know we're not debating the ethical nature of death penalties and all that stuff, but...
This was covered at my Catholic high school.
As a guy who also went to Catholic high school, they did discuss this, but they were very crazy about it, so we'll pass on that part. But yeah, and we don't start an IV using a syringe with the needle. Like, it's just the needle. And sometimes with just a little kind of tubing next to it that's locked a little bit with some fluid in there, just so we can see the flash and whatnot. But most of the time, we're just doing it with the needle. Once we see the flash of blood in there, you pull out the angiocath, or the needle part, leaving the little, how do I say it? It looks like almost like a straw. Yeah. The angiocath remaining back there, and then you hook everything up to it. And I didn't see any part where they hooked everything up to it, too.
I've been binging Fringe recently and noticed that they've actually been doing that right, as far as I know. Whenever, because they're knocking someone out every 3 episodes.
Yeah,
and
Fringe medicine.
Yeah, they're at least doing they're not inserting an IV with a syringe. Using a syringe.
Yeah, they're just using a needle.
Yeah.
And usually it looks like a sharp needle. At least from what I remember of Fringe, because I used to watch that every week all the time. It's so good. Then it just fell off the rails super crazy with all the observers and stuff like that. But we're not a Fringe podcast yet. Correct. And then you kind of see him, in the background the 3 syringes kind of sitting there. And each one was hooked up to a stopcock. I don't know if you noticed that part.
I did notice that, because
why? There's no need for an extra stopcock.
Too.
Yeah. Because you don't need to...
So, essentially, every syringe was also hooked onto a little valve that they would open or close, that they opened.
I think they closed them each time, actually. If I remember how stopcocks look like, and I could be wrong on this, I think they closed them each single time they did it, and then probably changed it afterward. But you don't need a stopcock there, honestly, because the stuff's not going to just run through. It's not like if you hooked up like a siphon and it just runs automatically once you hook everything up. You do have to push that in. So I don't know why that was there. And then all the meds looked exactly the same.
They did look exactly the same. I do have a question about the pacing of it. It felt to me that it was, even though we didn't see a hand, it was all of the syringes were being depressed.
Yes.
Was that speed that they were going at, was it slow and dramatic, or was that accurate?
I mean, I think it's limited by how much tubing you had in the bore of the needle again. So I think it's about right. I mean, modern execution machines for lethal injection, there's like 6 needles in there, and then 3 of them are filled with dummies, so you don't know which one's pushing which. But I think the rate that they push was right. The only problem I have is the pacing in between each medication given. So you're not giving any time for the medication to take effect.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so... They push them pretty much consecutively, like 2 seconds.
It all happened within 2 minutes.
2 minutes, yeah, because time of death was execution at midnight. Execution was time of death was at 12:02. So they didn't really give any time for each medication to take effect. I would assume at least when I'm getting ready to intubate a patient, the sedative takes about a minute, so we wait about a minute. The paralytic takes about a minute, and then we push the last one. So I would wait a whole minute, and that's the longest minute in the world. Like when you have a crashing patient, you're like, okay, push the meds. Okay, now we gotta wait, and we'll just stand there awkwardly, kind of looking at the clock, and then someone just goes, okay, it's been a minute. Okay, push the next med. Okay, let's sit here and awkwardly talk. Okay, now push it. Waiting a whole minute is a lot longer than you'd think in a stressful situation like that, and I'm surprised they didn't give her any time to break. So essentially, they could have just paralyzed her without full onset of the anesthetic, and she would have been paralyzed while conscious, which is
a Stephen King story.
Correct. That just sounds like a nightmare. I don't know if you've had sleep paralysis before, which is actually a real medical condition. Yep. You wake up, you're like, I can't move my whole body. It's the scariest thing in the world. Yeah. Same for this one.
Yeah.
So that is not good in that kind of thing. So they pushed the meds too quick, and they called the time of death so quickly.
They called the time of death incredibly quickly and with no examination whatsoever.
Correct. They just said, she's dead.
Yep.
I pushed all the meds. No way you're coming back to life from this one. Surprisingly, there's no medical professional on scene to even...
Well, we don't know we found out who the executioner was at the end of the episode. But who would generally do this?
So they do have doctors that will come in. Like the medical examiner would be one person that would come in, or the staff physician would come in and actually call time of death. But it always brings up this ethical dilemma. Like, can you as the doctor be the one that pushes the medications or even start the IV for that matter? And, you know, it's against the Hippocratic Oath. You're not supposed to do any harm. Like, that's the thing we're always taught. Do no harm, right? So usually in those situations, you're getting a nurse or even an untrained professional, like maybe even a warden, starting an IV. Or prison guards starting the IV. And they might not be trained to do it really well. And that's why sometimes that can prolong it for a lot longer than it should be.
That's terrifying.
It is very terrifying at that point. So after they did that, when they pronounced her dead, they kind of rush her back to the morgue area pretty quickly.
Very quickly, which it turns out is a good thing because they revert the death penalty. And it turns out that it's a character that we know from earlier in the season.
Correct.
That was the masked executioner.
Yeah.
That obviously has further plans for her.
Yeah, she didn't look very pale for someone who was dead. Like, Emma Roberts looked pretty, like, normal to
Emma Robertsy.
Yeah. But there's no medication that, at least, I don't know how much time had to elapse between time of death and her being brought back to the morgue and then brought back to life. But people were pretty lackadaisical about getting her out of the area. But once they got into the hallway, they kind of went pretty quick. There's no real meds that can reverse that kind of death.
Okay.
I have had situations where people have too high of a potassium.
We've
and that is reversible.
Right.
Like, I had residents that told me, oh my God, the potassium's high, fix it. I'm like, okay. And
this is rapidly becoming a potassium podcast.
Correct.
Because this is...
We've talked about this before.
Talked about potassium quite a bit.
But there's no, like, magic antidote to push in and then reverse the potassium overdose without sustaining
Especially
her
not
life.
in 8 seconds.
Correct. But also, her heart stopped, right?
Right. Or did it?
Because we don't know if the drugs were switched. Because, as they mentioned earlier in the episode, potassium chloride is a colorless drug. All that was yellow. So did she get a bunch of sedative, maybe, that knocked her out and made her stop breathing? But if she did stop breathing, shouldn't she turn purple?
Yeah. Shouldn't she turn purple? Shouldn't she...
Her heart stopped already. Yeah. No one's doing CPR.
Of course no one's doing CPR.
No one's doing CPR. But she dead.
Yeah.
Like, there's no blood flowing to the brain. She's not going to gasp and wake up and instantly recognize this person who saved her life because her brain is mush.
Yeah, because she's been at least not breathing for the past 2 minutes.
At least. And that's a long time for you to be down. Like, out of hospital arrests lasting for that long, the actual rate or actual percentage of recovery is very low, like less than 5%. I think it's like less than 5%. So she dead.
All right.
And that ends the season there. I know they're building for something epic. We don't know.
We don't know what's happening next, so we might be doing a follow-up episode early next week.
Yeah, it could be one of those mini episode kind of situations, but we don't know if the drugs were switched because I don't know if that was the red herring or kind of clue that Ryan Murphy or whoever wrote this episode was trying to suggest that she didn't get potassium chloride.
The colorless, odorless herring.
Correct. That's the one. Like, that could be the thing that is your MacGuffin or whatever, or Chekhov's gun even for bringing her back, and potentially not making this a giant loophole.
Right.
I'm sure someone probably talked about it on Reddit or something like that. I'll be honest. I don't follow that much American Horror Story. We watched this episode based on my wife's recommendation. But this is very good for pointing out bad stuff that happened in this one, for sure.
So.
You're going to human centipede me?
I'm going to human centipede. No, we're not going to use that verb. That is not a verb we're using.
You're going to human centipede question me?
A human centipede is purportedly 100% medically accurate. If that is true, how medically accurate was this episode of American Horror Story?
Less than 100% for sure.
All right.
I mean, human centipede at least tried a little bit more than this one, I would say. But, you know, the medicine explanation by Richard Ramirez's actor, very good. The execution...
The execution of the execution.
Not as good. So I probably would go towards like 80 to 90%.
80 to 90% medically accurate. Sorry, Ryan Murphy.
Call me. I can help you.
Yeah.
I can help you make this more horror-y.
I know a guy.
Yeah. I can make Hortober way better.
American Hortober.
Yeah.
How would you make it better?
I mean, it always comes down to, okay, the medication part, that might be a storyline situation. So I'm not touching that part. But just based on the whole starting the IV and actually doing the execution itself, Getting a good IV in, that's like, I don't understand why everyone makes it so much more dramatic than it should be. Like, we've touched on this umpteenth times, right? There's no reason to go so sharp of an angle into the arm. It just looks tacky. And every medical professional in America cringes whenever they see it. So
I wonder if it's a prop thing. I wonder if it's...
But even if it's a prop thing, it's not that hard to just go shallow. Like, I'm showing Johnny right now on my arm. It's not hard to go shallow in. It still looks just as, like, gross and disturbing to go shallow than to go deep, you know? And then once you get that flash of blood, it makes people pass out because, oh my God, blood's coming out of your body in a controlled fashion now. It still looks just as bad. So that's not a hard thing. I think hooking her up and priming the tube and all that stuff, setting her up for all that stuff, that still looks really gross too. That can be an easy thing to fix as well. So very minor things to fix in this stuff. And then obviously pushing the medications. Why the heck are you using a stopcock? In medicine itself, we rarely use stopcocks unless we're trying to set up pumps, which is just like continuous infusions or drips like that, or giving adenosine to fix someone's weird heart rate where we're trying to push stuff quickly through. But for the most part, I wouldn't use stopcocks on this patient or victim.
Patient in quotes.
Patient in quotes, or victim, I guess, in general. And then the other part I would fix is the neck slicing scene.
Yep.
Not as much blood, but you can still make it gross because you can still see maybe the windpipe. And if you want to make it a little gross, I mean, if you cut the throat here,
you just extend the angle of the cut.
not so much. Not even. Let's say you didn't even do that, and there's a little bit of blood there. If they had cut deep enough, you would do essentially a cricothyrotomy. I'm sure you've heard like stories like Ron Swanson going, "I saved someone with a kitchen knife," or taught a kid how to save their mom using a butter knife. Performing a cricothyrotomy. If you cut the membrane here, you're basically exposing the whole windpipe. So if you have a little blood here, make it bubble. It looks just as gross. It's kind of like the scene from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Where they cut here and it was just bubbling and gurgling. Do that. Looks just as gross. Looks more accurate. Much more dramatic hearing the death gurgles than just seeing blood spraying around.
Than just having blood show up on somebody else's
We're
face.
on a very big horror kick. Like, that is perfect way to end how to make something way gross at the end of hashtag Hortober, for sure.
All right. So this is the end of hashtag Hortober, which will return with or without the same hashtag next year.
Nah, I don't. It's coming back. It's going to be hashtag Hortober 2020.
But meanwhile, if you've got questions or have a suggestion for us for what we can be doing through November as we move into the holiday season, shoot us an email at hieverybodypodcast@gmail.com. Or hit us up on social media at HiEverybodyMD. Pretty much everywhere you're going to find us.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, folks, for a wonderful spooky season, and we will see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. A Bad Medicine podcast is hosted by Dr. Jackson Vane and me, Johnny Kolosinski. Our intro this week came from Tom Feeney of the Deep Dive Podcast. You can find them at thedeepdivepodcast.com or just by checking the show notes. If you're interested in recording your own intro, you can find instructions on how to do so at hieverybody.libsyn.com.